I love shooting on Super 8 film. It gives that charmingly imperfect, nostalgic feel. But it's so expensive that I just can't justify filming with it very often. But what if I told you that some of this footage you're seeing was actually shot with a digital camera? This whole thing started a few years ago when I shot some Super 8 footage with a digital camera right next to it. And so this week I'm revisiting the footage with my latest colour grading tricks. Now, since I've managed to get a fairly close match between these two shots, I should be able to copy the effects over to other digital footage. And to prove it, I shot this incredibly digital footage on my phone yesterday. If I can make this look like Super 8 film, then I'll call this little science project a success. So on the left here we have the Super 8 footage, and on the right here we have footage shot with my trusty old Canon T3i. And this is how close I was able to get them. So let me just turn off all of these nodes and I'll take you through these one by one. So the first thing I did is saturation. Quite straightforward really, but I just wanted to add a little bit more saturation overall. So this would normally be 50 and I just put it up to 57. And then I went into the luma versus saturation. So this takes the shadows and makes them more saturated, and the highlights and makes them a bit less saturated. And the next one is contrast. And so you can see that I've taken the shadows down a little bit. I brought the midtones up a lot. This would previously have been like that, and I boosted them up. And same thing with the gain, I boosted that up. And you can see on the scopes how before this was a lot darker, and now they're kind of closer to matching. You can see there's a bunch of kind of purpley magenta in the shadows. And so I went over to this node and used, in the log controls, I put a bunch of kind of bluish purple into the shadows. And the reason I did it in the log area is so that I could set the range down to 0 and then kind of increase it gradually. And this lets me control how much of that purple from the shadows influences the brighter parts of the image. 0.3. But clearly it's gone too far in the darker parts of the image, so that's where I created this other node called Shadows Fix, and this one I've gone in the opposite direction, so back towards green, and you can see how that just takes out the magenta from the darker parts. But you might notice that the yellow in the background has also been affected by that magenta. With this node, where I went into the hue versus hue control curves, you can basically make a specific color like the yellows, change the hue of them. Here I just took them a little bit down, which meant that they've got less red in them. So that's the general kind of colors matched, but clearly there's a lot more we can do to match these shots. So for these next nodes, I want to try and replicate this kind of blooming highlights and the kind of color fringing. So let's see if we can replicate that. And I started with a glow effect. So this node simply has a glow effect, and the spread controls how spread out the glow effect is, and the threshold controls how much of the image is going to glow. So those are the numbers that I use. And so this is adding a kind of blur around the brightest parts of the image, but we've also lost details. So when I turn on this layer node beneath it, you can see how that brings back the highlights. We're just adding the glow to the darker parts of the image. And the way I did that was using a qualifier. So this is qualifying by luminance, which means that this glow effect is only being applied to the areas of the image that are darker than this. But with the Super 8 footage, there's actually some color fringing happening along those edges, and so that's what this node is for. This one is my halation node. You can see that adds some color around the edges, but once again it messes up our highlights, so I'm going to copy this layer node over, and now you can see how that's just adding a little bit of color. You can see before and after. And so I'll quickly show you what's going on in this node. We're basically mixing a blank node with this node on the bottom, and we're using the composite mode add, which means that if the image was totally dark, then nothing would happen, because this is what we're adding to the frame. We're adding 0, we're adding darkness. And so by bringing up these highlights in the curves, all I'm saying is that I only want the brighter parts of the image to be affected. Then I've gone over to the blur effect, and I've separated out the red, green and blue channels by unlocking them here. And now I can independently blur just the red channel of this image. And so now we're adding a blurry red effect just to the highlights of the image. And so if I head out of this compound node and turn it on and off, then you can see exactly what's happening. And I've actually taken this down to 50% on the key output. So 1 would be a full-blown, really intense effect, taking it down to 50% intensity. So we're getting pretty close, but you can see, especially when I hit play, that there's a lot of noise in the Super 8 and a lot of scratches and just in general, it's a much softer image. So let's try and add all of those effects to our digital footage. Now to save time, I've actually added these effects to a group. And all this means is that this clip is part of the group called Super 8. And so if I wanted to add these effects to it, like say the film grain, then I could add another shot to the same group, like so, Super 8 assigned to group. And now that same film grain is applied automatically because it's part of the same group. So if I turn that back off here, then it turns it off here. And that saves us a lot of time. So let's go through these one by one real quick. We've got, first is a flicker effect, and it's almost unnoticeable. It basically just adjusts the exposure, and I've fiddled with these settings to try and find something that suits the Super 8 look. Then the next thing is this film damage effect, and I had to reset all of these effects because it was trying to do blur and all vignetting and stuff. But what I'm interested in is the add dirt. And so I did two nodes, one with a beige color and a density of 2. And the second one was a dark gray, but otherwise exactly the same effect, just slightly less dense, so there's fewer little bits of dirt. The next effect is a very straightforward one, blur. And for this one, very simple, blur. I found that 0.23 seems to be a good match. Then we have film grain, and this was something I just kind of fiddled with all the different settings and ended up going with these numbers. The key thing to notice is that the saturation is quite high, because I noticed looking at the Super 8 that there is some color in the grain, it's not totally grayscale. And the last one is a jitter effect. All it is a camera shake effect, and I have turned off the pan amplitude so that the shot doesn't move side to side, and just done a tiny little bit of tilt amplitude. And then I basically messed around with these numbers until I was happy with how the motion looked. So let's recap through those one by one. We start with the flicker effect, then we added some beige dirt, then we added some dark grey dirt before adding the blur, and then the grain, and then right at the end, a jitter effect, as if the film strip is not quite aligned perfectly. Whew, okay, that was pretty in-depth. Thanks for bearing with me. That got more geeky than I thought it would. But the real question is, do these techniques work with other digital footage? So we wanted to test this against my iPhone footage, absolutely no color grading, and all I do is add it to the group, and now we've got the blur and we've got the grain and everything, and then I can select the shot that we worked on and apply the grade. And this is going to give us our whole node tree. And because this shot has a different exposure, I'm going to reset those levels just to show you how quick it is. And I reckon all we need is a little bit down in the shadows, a little bit more in the midtones, and finally we might choose to back off the magenta effect a little bit, maybe put this down to 0.8 just so it's not quite so pink and purple. And so we've taken a shot like this, and in a matter of seconds turned it into something like this. This is what happens when I apply the grade and add it to the same group. I'm pretty impressed by how cinematic that looks. You can see the bloom effect without tweaking anything. It's giving us a nice little bit of blooming around these highlights. And the halation is just affecting the very brightest parts in a very subtle way. So there we go. I have to say I've enjoyed getting all scientific today, but the cool thing about faking the Super 8 look is that you can pick and choose which elements to include. You might not like the scratches, or you might want to shoot in widescreen. It's totally up to you. But I feel like I should say that no matter how much we fake the Super 8 look, it's never going to be quite as perfectly imperfect as real film. So I really wanted to keep this video short, but if you found any of these techniques I've talked about overwhelming, or if you're just not used to software like DaVinci Resolve, then I'd like to tell you about my latest Skillshare class, which looks thoroughly at all of the techniques from this video. I explain the tools and techniques I'm using, like the various nodes and qualifiers, while showing you my day-to-day color grading workflow. So if you'd like to watch that on Skillshare, the online learning community, then feel free to click the link in the description, and if you're one of the first 1,000 people, you'll get 30% off an annual Skillshare Premium membership. That way you can watch my 55-minute class, How to Improve Your Films with Color Grading, along with getting access to Skillshare's entire library. It doesn't matter if you've already had a free trial on Skillshare before, you can still use this link to get a full year of unlimited learning. And since you've made it to the end of the video, I thought I'd let you know that I'm making this overlay file available for download. You just overlay it on top of your footage and it will instantly give the grain, flicker and dirt overlays that I created today. So that will be linked below the video as well, totally for free, no strings attached. But anyway, I hope you found this useful. My name's Simon Cade, this has been DSLR Guide, and I'll see you next time.